Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Need to Know channel. This is the channel about the things that you need to know. And today, we're going to be speaking about the ZCC, also known as the Zion Christian Church. The Zion Christian Church, also known as the ZCC, is one of the largest and most influential religious movements in South Africa, with a membership that spans millions across the continent. Established in 1910 by Enginas Lekhanyane, the ZCC has grown into a powerful spiritual and social force, blending African traditions with Christian teachings. Its unique practices emphasize on community and addressing social challenges. This has made it a cornerstone of faith for many. In this two-part series, we're going to be exploring the history, beliefs, and the impact of the ZCC, examining how it has shaped the religious and cultural landscape of South Africa and beyond. We're going to begin this by speaking about the founder of the ZCC, which is Enginas Barnabas Lekhanyane, who was born in 1885 and later passed away in 1948. He was one of the 6 children of Matseleng Barnabas Lekhanyane and Sephora Rapela, daughter of Marobatota Rapela. My apologies sincerely if I am butchering these names, please just bear with me. He first formed the ZCC in 1924, and by the time of his death, the church had at least 80,000 members. Under the leadership of his descendants, the ZCC has gone on to have more than 12 million members, primarily located in Southern Africa. It is now by far the biggest of the various Zionist Christian sects that account for roughly half of all Christians in Southern Africa. One of the most notable aspects is the distinctive uniform, which is worn by members during a church service or other occasions, such as weddings and funerals. The uniform for men is a brown khaki top and bottom, with large white shoes and a black flat-topped hat. The women, if they're in the choir, wear a bright blue dress and a green beret, or green skirts and a bright yellow blouse with a green headscarf. They both wear this iconic badge with a star or a dove. The uniform is seen as a sign of unity and identity amongst the church members. Now, let's speak about the early life of Enginas Lekhanyane. Enginas Lekhanyane was born at Mpome Mission in Hyenesburg region of Transvaal in 1885. His parents, Barnabas Lekhanyane and Sephora Rapela, were members of the Mamabolo ethnic group, which were also a part of the Balobedu tribe. The Rapela family were the first Christian converts amongst the Mamabolo and had been instrumental in getting a Lutheran mission established by the Berlin Missionary Society in 1879. Drought, disruptions, and the violence associated with the South African War in 1899 led to the Mamabolo chiefs to abandon their homelands for some years. The Lekhanyanes appear to have left with them, but then returned home when the chief purchased Sacral Farm in 1905, next to the original reserve. Soon after the move back, an Anglican missionary built a mission and a school called the St. Andrews, adjacent to the Skryferkriel farm. This was the school where Lekhanyane received 3 years of education, which had been disrupted in the previous decade. During this time, Lekhanyane spent considerable amounts of time working on construction projects, including the building of a church, a school, and a dam. He did not choose to receive baptism or confirmation as an Anglican, although many members of his family, his future wife, and many residents of Skryferkriel did. After leaving school, he kept himself busy by shooting doves, which he often gave to his grandfather and to his uncle. He was a favorite amongst the old people who praised him for his good behavior. He is also said to have been close with his grandfather and his uncle from his mother's side, both of whom were pagans and renowned traditional doctors. Engenas later suffered from what seemed to be an incurable eye disease for many years until 1912, when he told his parents that he had a vision and heard a voice telling him to leave for Johannesburg, where he would find many churches that could cure his disease. Specifically, he was looking for a church that would baptize him 3 times, submerging him into water. This would cure his eye. After this vision, he would leave for Johannesburg and began working around the Transvaal and begin his search for the church that he was told about in his vision. In 1912, he was baptized by the brothers Elias and Joseph Mahlangu of the Zion Apostolic Church, also known as the ZAC. As a new member of the ZAC, he did some mission work in the Mamabolo area as well. But he could not baptize his converts because he had not been ordained. At that time, baptisms were only performed by Reverend A. Mamabolo until Mahlangu brothers ordained Engenas in 1918. Engenas differed with his fellow ministers on the validity of certain practices in the church, such as wearing of long white clothes, growing of beards by the men, and taking off their shoes before entering the church. It was, however, alleged that the main reason for their differences was a struggle for power in the ZAC. Consequently, the relationship between Engenas and the Mahlangu brothers deteriorated. Engenas was demoted to a lower rank and finally broke away from the ZAC. He then joined the Zion Apostolic Faith Mission, also known as the ZAFM, of Edward Motaung, who was stationed in Basotholand, known today as Lesotho, and soon became the leader of the ZAFM in the Transvaal. By 1924, the division between the leaders of the ZAFM and Engenas was clear. Not only had the ZAFM become too big for Motaung to control from Basotholand, but the relationship between Engenas and Motaung suffered when Engenas breached the constitution of the church by taking a second wife. These reasons were probably secondary to the leadership's ambitions of the regional bishops. Engenas felt that the only option was to establish a new church. Probably with this in mind, he went up to Mount Tabahone in 1924 to pray. There, according to tradition, God instructed him to start a new church. Engenas then ended his relationship with the ZAFM. The name for his new church had to be entirely new, but the word Zion had to be retained because Engenas believed that the word denoted from the true and original church as found in the Old Testament. He eventually decided on the Zion Christian Church. Engenas Lachanyane thus had a diverse Protestant background with the Lutheran, Anglican, and Presbyterian experiences. Basically, he had taken certain practices from different churches and fused into one that is more digestible to the people of that time. Many theologians see a flaw in this way of conducting a new church, but we will touch on that a little bit later in the video. Before we continue with the video, please don't forget to press the like button, subscribe button, and drop a comment below of what you think about the origins of the ZCC. Now, let's speak about the origins of the ZCC. The ZCC, being one of the largest and most influential African initiative churches in South Africa with approximately 12 million members today. The headquarters of the church is located in the Republic of South Africa and also has branches in cities and towns around South Africa and neighboring countries like Botswana, Lesotho, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Zambia, and Mozambique. How this all began was that in 1925, a simple constitution, which was rarely used, was drawn up to accompany an application for state recognition by the founder of the ZCC. The constitution pointed out that the ZCC aimed at spreading the word of God in the whole world. The aim and objectives appeared to be like any other established Christian church. In reality, traditional practices and different ways of faith healing often became more important than spiritual salvation. The Zion Christian Church was one of the many independent churches in South Africa at that time. Independent meaning that there was no white control. This is because government policies through these years of 1924 and 1948 was one of non-intervention in the affairs of the black man. That way, they gave the ZCC a chance for development and growth at a crucial time because one of the biggest churches in South Africa was brewing. Members of the ZCC never saw it from a point of separation from other black churches, but they regarded the church as a purely new thing started by a man commissioned by God as a result of his faith. Engenas and his followers intended to settle in Tabagone, his birthplace, but because of a dispute with the chief of Mamabolo, they had to leave. The dispute was closely linked to a power struggle, with evidence clearly indicating that Engenas was vying for chieftainship, including the fact that Engenas' grandfather, Marabotota Rapela, was a famous witch doctor, confused many in their assessment of the church. Almost every writer, with the exception of M.L. Daniel, who attempted to write about the church but emphasized on this point. Many people in and around Mamabolo area failed to relate to Christianity to a descendant of a witch doctor. There was an attempt on the part of the people to discredit the ZCC and to place it in the category of a no church but witchcraft. This attitude blinded people to see even the vital achievements of the church. Unbothered, his followers were increasingly coming to him for counsel, rather than going to Mamabolo. Eventually, in 1939, Engenas and his people left. He bought a farm at the Rapelele in the Petersburg district, but because the climate was way too hot for him, he left. In the 1940s, he bought 2 farms in McLean and Kleinfontein, near Boyne, and this became the headquarters of his church. Most of the old members of the church tell that they regarded Zion as referring to the place of a specific person. Whenever they visited Engenas, they would say that they were going to Zion. Engenas headed his church in the same way as a tribal chief. He appointed and ordained ministers who were responsible to him. He proclaimed new rituals, saw to it that they followed it, and punished those who contravened the rituals. One of the ways that the church remained attractive to its followers is that it offered its members protection against witchcraft and superstitious beliefs. Most of the protection was preventative. That is why it's very common to find a person of the church say, "I never liked the ZCC, but I joined because of my illness." You would hear this coming from most of the old members. Most of the members today were born into the church. And this protection appears to have given the church a firm foundation for speedy development. At the same time, the church had to serve as a hospital and even to basically cause trouble or problems on the same people that caused the problems for them, which are usually the and premarital sex. They also prohibited the consumption or handling of pork in any form or way. When it comes to the baptism, it was by threefold immersion into the river. It was, however, taken as a gateway into the ZCC and not symbolic of the rebirth into the kingdom of God. In this growing phase of the church, it came across a number of challenges during the growth, such as being dubbed as the church of the poor, the church of the uneducated, and the church of the heathens. Although this did not stop the rapid growth of the church. By 1926, the ZCC had 926 members countrywide. In 1928, Engenas introduced the use of a badge for the purpose of identification. It also served as a token of faithfulness to the church and a symbol of solidarity and oneness. The badge itself also served as protection against criminals in urban areas and as a sign of trustworthiness. However, this led to the misuse, and by 1935, non-members, even criminals, were using the badge to their advantage. The different emblems on the badge, the dove and the star, were only introduced later by his sons. He also insisted that members should carry their baptismal cards for the purpose of identification. Another unifying factor in the ZCC was polygamy, which was seen as a God-created mode of life. ZCC supporters preferred polygamy to divorce, and polygamists were offered ministerial positions. Engenas later bought several plots and farms in the area where trading stores and other business enterprises were opened. At the time of his death, Engenas, as well as the ZCC, were financially in a good position. The main reason in the rapid growth of the church is because it conformed more to African ways of life and culture. Although modern ways of life were accommodated, there was a strong tendency to restore old values, norms, and native cultural patterns. Most churches in those times would encourage followers to let go of their traditional customs as a passport to heaven, but Engenas knew that in order to grow the church, he had to meet them halfway with their customs, making Christianity more accessible and acceptable to the people. From 1945, Engenas's health deteriorated, and he began to spend nearly all of his time at home while his counselors fulfilled all of his duties. He only appeared in public during conferences. The crucial point for Engenas was the appointment of his successor, which the Constitution stipulated was the responsibility of the conference, which were the ordained ministers and the preachers. Since nobody consulted the Constitution, the ZCC members believed that the appointment of a successor was Engenas's prerogative and that he would appoint his eldest son. Before his death, he summoned his elder brothers and the elders of the church, including his advocate P.W. Roos. He presented his fifth and favorite son, Joseph, as his successor and also as the future bishop. However, in May 1948, Engenas died without personally announcing his successor. He was laid to rest at his home in Moria on the 1st of June 1948, a date which has since been sanctified by the ZCC. He left a congregation of about 80,000 people. The fact that the new leader could not be announced before the one-year mourning period had expired caused much confusion and insecurities amongst the members. This delay and the death of the eldest son, Barnabas, in 1949 before the successor could be announced probably contributed to the subsequent split in the church. Engenas was a very ambitious and charismatic leader who attracted a lot of people to the church. He was successful in using Christianity to establish a supra-ethical tribe of Zionists. Through Engenas, underprivileged people were afforded a place to learn Western modes of living. For example, they were advised to bank their money, to wear Western clothes, and to replace the traditional beer with coffee and tea. Now, we're going to speak about what happened after the death of Engenes Lekganyane. Let's remember that back in 1918, Engenes married Salfina Rabidiba. 5 sons and 1 daughter were born from this marriage. They were considered the rightful heirs. Engenes, however, was a polygamist who had more than 2 wives, but the children from these relationships were not considered by the ZCC, nor regarded as future leaders. They were only members of the brass band. During the split in the church after Engenes' death, the second wife was expelled, but the third wife managed to remain because she was a member of the Lekganyane family. Leading to the death of Engenes Lekganyane, we're going to speak about the 2 key figures that took the role of leader after his death. One of them being Edward Engenes Lekganyane. Edward was born in 1922 and passed away on the 21st of October 1967 in Tabagone, Mamobolo area, Pietersburg district. Firstly known as Tulane Ruben, was the leader of the Zion Christian Church, the Star, that gained subsequent support in the urban areas, and his younger brother Joseph Engenes Mahlakanye Lekganyane. Joseph was then born on the 21st of January 1931 in the Mamabolo area, Pietersburg district, and passed away in Womberg, Pietersburg district on the 11th of November 1972. He was the leader of the St. Engenes Zion Christian Church, the Dove, that had most of its support in the rural areas. The brother grew up on the family farm in Moria, where they attended private school. Edward to standard 5, which is grade 7 today, and Joseph up to standard 6, which is grade 8 today. Through correspondence courses, Edward obtained his standard 6 certificate in 1959 and Joseph the junior certificate. As a young man, Edward apparently had a clash with his father and found a job in Natal. Joseph, however, became a personal driver to his father in 1946 and accompanied him to all the official church gatherings and meetings. It was during this period that Joseph familiarized himself with the church administration. Upon the death of Engenes, the struggle between Edward and Joseph for the church leadership led to a split in the ZCC. Edward had already gained much support in the urban areas of especially Johannesburg, where the ZCC followers considered him as the future leader of the ZCC. Furthermore, they supported the traditional appointment of the eldest son as successor, which following Barnabas's death was Edward. In this way, Edward became the leader of the biggest group of his father's followers. Edward set out that the Zion City Moria is going to be the headquarters of his church on the family farm and had a 5-pointed star of David with the letters ZCC affixed upon the original badge. From his headquarters, he established congregations from Cape Town to southern Rhodesia, modern-day Zimbabwe, and probably also invited countries like Botswana and Tanzania. Thousands of people gathered in Moria during the yearly Easter celebration of the ZCC. Edward led the procession as leader of the brass band, and his sermon on Easter Sunday was the one to highlight the celebrations, which also included faith healing. The people believed the experience as a sort of Jerusalem where the Messiah builds his new kingdom. Moreover, in the presence of the prophet Edward, they could experience power, protection, and peace. Apart from the church matters, Edward was also involved in business enterprises and tribal politics in Moria. He purchased several properties and farms in the area. Through the mediation of the SS Dema, he was allowed in 1963 to enroll for a 3-year training course for evangelists at the Stoffberg Theological School of the Dutch Reformed Church at Teflo. He completed the course in 1966 and received a certificate. After the completion of his studies, he attempted to renew the ZCC through stronger biblical approach, but his untimely death stopped the attempt. Edward was described as a fairly intelligent, agreeable, and frank person. He was a charismatic leader, a good organizer, and he was idolized by his followers. Like his father, he maintained a good relationship with the National Party government. The then Minister of Bounty Affairs was invited to Moria in 1965. On this occasion, Edward declared that his church had no place for people who undermined the safety of the apartheid South Africa. He also assured the government of his loyalty. There are reports that suggest that the ZCC was also involved in social and political issues. During the apartheid regime, the church provided a space for the black South Africans to organize politically and advocate for their rights. Today, the church continues to be involved in issues such as education, health, and poverty alleviation in the communities. Out of a small group of his father's followers, he built up the biggest independent African church of its kind in South Africa. His followers honored him as chief, king, prophet, and even the Messiah and Savior. He himself preferred the title of bishop. In 1954, he amended the constitution to make bishopric the inheritance of the Lekganyane family. Edward died suddenly of a heart attack at his home in Moria. His funeral was viewed in secrecy and was only attended by a small group of his followers. He was succeeded by his son Barnabas. Edward married Evelyn in 1950. 2 daughters and a son, Barnabas, were born of this marriage. Since the ZCC recognized polygamy, Edward apparently had at least 23 other wives, some living in Soweto and Durban. After the death of both Edward and Joseph, their sons did not take over immediately. They were regents, namely Mr. Mahale for Barnabas and Phineas Lekganyane for Engenes. If you have made it this far in the video, I'd like to thank you so much for staying tuned, and this is the end of our part 1 series of the video. Please drop a like, comment, and subscribe if you like the content, and drop a comment to tell us what you think about the history of the ZCC.